This is the Unique Stories About Us, a program where I discover and discuss the strange and wonderful stories that surround us. So, without further ado, let us begin now.
First Expedition, Chapter 1, Our Nocturnal Visitor. In the year 1902, I was engaged on a survey of the then unmapped country between the rivers Amur and Ussuri on the west and the Sea of Japan on the east, to the north of Vladivostok. It is marked on English maps as the Maritime Province, but it is conveniently referred to as Ussuria from its dominant river. My duties included the making of a reconnaissance of the chief rivers and of the central watershed, the range called Sikhote Alin, which dominates the province. My orders covered the study of the zoology and botany of the district, and of the natives, both aborigines and immigrant. I had with me 2 assistants and a small detachment of Siberian rifles and Cossacks with pack horses. It is rough, steep, mountainous country where we were trekking, covered with dense virgin forest, the famous taiga of Siberia, in places almost impenetrable, especially where the ground is littered with fallen giants smashed down by storms. One afternoon, when the sun was low over the horizon, it was time to stop and bivouac. There was urgent need to find water quickly for both beasts and men. The slopes were gentle at first, but farther on the gradient became much steeper, and the horses slid down, squatting on their hocks. The packs slipped forward, and if it had not been for the breech hands, they would have fallen over the horses' heads. We were obliged to make long zigzags, and through all the windfalls that littered the ground here, it was by no means easy going. Over the pass, we dropped at once into a gulch. The place was extraordinarily broken. Deep screes, encumbered with boulders and trunks, streams and rocks, all thickly overgrown with a carpet of moss. The whole scene reminded me vividly of a picture of Walpurgis Night. It would be hard to imagine a wilder and more repellent scene than that grim gorge. Sometimes it happens that mountain and forest have such a cheerful and attractive appearance that one would be glad to linger there forever. In others, mountains seem surly and wild. It is a strange thing that such impressions are not purely personal and subjective, but were felt by all the men in the detachment. I tested this several times and was always convinced that it was so. That was the case here. In that spot, there was an oppressive feeling in the air, something unhappy and painful, and the sensation of gloom and ill omen was felt by us all. "Never mind," said the rifleman, "we'll manage to bivouac somehow or other. We're not here for a year, and we'll find a jollier place tomorrow." I did not want to stop there either, but what else could we do? Night was coming on, and there was no time to lose. I could hear the murmur of a brook at the bottom of the defile, so made my way down to it and chose the nearest approach to a level spot and gave orders to pitch camp there. The silence of the forest was at once broken by the ring of axes, and by human voices as the men started collecting firewood, unsaddling the horses, and preparing supper. Poor horses. Among those rocks and broken branches they would find little grazing, I feared, but we would make it up for them the next day if we succeeded in getting through to some farmers' cabins. Darkness comes on early in the forest. In the west, a few spots of pale sky were still to be picked out between the black branches of the pines, but below the shades of night had already fallen. As our bonfire sprang into flame, the dark clumps of shrubs and thick trunks of the trees stood out in the glare against the darkness. A little squirrel-like pika, startled among the screes, uttered a high-pitched pipe, but suddenly frightened, slipped nimbly into its hole and did not appear again. At length our little party quieted down. After drinking tea, each one of us was busy on his own particular job. One was cleaning his rifle, another repairing a saddle or darning a piece of torn clothing. There is always plenty of that sort of work to be done. When they had finished, the men turned in to sleep. They pressed up close to each other for warmth, covered themselves with their greatcoats, and slept like the dead. The horses, finding no food among the rocks, came up close to our bivouac and stood and drowsed. Only Arsenyev and I remained awake. I described our road in my diary, and he patched his boots. About 10, I rolled myself up in my shaggy Caucasian cloak, or burqa, and lay down by the fire. The branches of the old fir under which we were sleeping swayed in the rising column of heat and smoke from the fire, disclosing and closing the dark sky above, all spangled in a long colonnade of stars which faded away gradually into the depths of the forest and imperceptibly merged into the blackness of the night. Suddenly the horses raised their heads and pricked up their ears, were restive a moment, then quieted down, and resumed their drowse. We paid no attention to that and continued our conversation. A minute or two went by. I asked my assistant Arsenyev something, and not receiving a reply, turned towards him. He was standing in an attitude of expectancy and shading the glare of the fire with his hand, gazing into the darkness. "What's up?" I asked. "Something coming down the hillside," he whispered. We both listened, but all around was still as it can be only in the heart of a forest on a cold autumn night. Suddenly, some small stones came trickling down from above. "A bear, I expect," said Arsenyev, and began to load his rifle.